When Franz Schubert composed his string quartet in D minor, well known as Death in the Maiden, he was just 27 years old, but already facing his imminent mortality. This was 1824, and Schubert was battling the effects of syphilis, a diagnosis that at that time was a slow and certain death sentence. He was deeply depressed, financially struggling, and often isolated. Rather than quietly surrendering, he poured his fear, rage, and full spectrum of humanity into his music. In the years that followed his syphilis diagnosis, he wrote some of his most personal and exquisite music. This included his Winterreise, the incredible cello quintet, the unfinished symphony, this Death in the Maiden quartet, and his G major string quartet. These works demonstrate a person who is facing death not by fighting it directly, but by creating through it. Someone looking for spiritual transcendence, and someone who perhaps understood that his art and his voice could outlast his physical being and give meaning to his life even beyond his death. Death in the Maiden is a profound meditation on the duality between life and death, or maybe even light and darkness, and this is seen in all four movements. In the first movement, the human fight against fate is felt throughout. The opening borders on being violent. But is immediately followed by questioning tenderness. Throughout the first movement, the juxtaposition of music driven by urgency and fear to exquisitely beautiful and lyrical music, as well as the alternation of major and minor tonalities, demonstrate the duality Schubert was feeling at this time. The idea that moments of hope were always tinged with despair, but that despair was always being fought by the strength of the human spirit. The use of triplets in the first movement is one of the most striking rhythmic features. They provide an emotionally transformative backbone throughout the movement, and their use is deeply rooted in Viennese musical tradition. The use of triplets can be traced as a source of rhythmic vitality through the classical and early Romantic periods, as well as a symbol of elegance, as is in the case of Viennese waltzes. By merging this tradition with Schubert's own expressive language, he turns this rhythm into a symbol of continuity and transformation. The title Death in the Maiden comes from a song Schubert had written 7 years earlier, which sets a poem by the German poet Matthias Claudius. In the poem, the maiden says, "Pass by, ah, pass by, away, cruel death. I am still young, leave me, dear one, and do not touch me." And death replies, "Give me your hand, you lovely, tender creature. I am your friend and come not to chastise. Be of good courage, I am not cruel. You shall sleep softly in my arms." The song becomes the foundation for the quartet's second movement, a theme and variations that forms the emotional center of the work. The theme itself represents death's calm, steady, and inevitable voice. But duality is ever present, death as both terrifying and comforting, and the maiden moving from agitation to serenity. Schubert's connection to this theme was not merely poetic. In the song, he quotes 4 bars from the Cilician Song of Death, a melody his deeply religious mother had often sung. She had died when Schubert was only 15, and this quotation infuses the music with a personal resonance. Death is not only an abstract figure, but a familiar presence, bound up with memory, loss, and tenderness. In Death in the Maiden, that remembered melody becomes both a lament and a gesture of reconciliation, perhaps with death and perhaps with his mother herself. Throughout the variations, we journey through disbelief, resistance, hope tinged with sadness, terror and pleading, resignation, and ultimately, transcendence and peace. The themes of death and duality continue in the third movement, which is a scherzo with the contrasting trio. The scherzo is a wild and relentless scherzo with syncopation contributing to its frenzied terror and unstoppable motion. At this time, it is likely that Schubert could have been influenced by a resurgence of interest in medieval art, and particularly the portrayal of danse macabre or Totentanz. The suddenly lyrical and tender trio in D major briefly interrupts the dark scherzo, and life and beauty exist once again, if only for a short time. Ultimately, the ABA structure of a scherzo trio means that the scherzo must return, and the joy that the trio has brought vanishes into that fatal energy. The fourth and final movement continues to draw inspiration from dance. This time, it's a tarantella, an Italian dance meant to ward off evil spirits and even death. The relentless and feverish energy and forward momentum make it simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. This is a manic tarantella, a desperate dance of life confronting its own terrifying end. Although this piece ends in a storm of D minor, the human spirit remains defiant to the end. Perhaps the final duality in this work is that Schubert still finds a way to reach deeply into himself and dance in the face of death.